Hey everyone, welcome to r/Tales from Tech Support, where we get to have a little chuckle at the technologically disadvantaged. Like me. I'm Uncle Reddit, and have I got a story for you. User needs help not having to do their job? I get a call from a user telling me that she's got an issue with her computer locking her out every 15 minutes. She's your average non-IT savvy user, so I'm going through the usual open and closed-ended questions, trying to work out if I'm checking her Active Directory account, her VIP access credentials, or if her Citrix desktop is timing out sooner than the usual 30-minute idle time. Turns out it's none of them. She means her auto PC lock. I ask her why she wants to change that, and turns out she's working for the evening in some capacity that requires her to monitor a queue. But it's at night, and she, in her own words, don't want to have to press a button every 10-15 minutes to stop the computer from locking. So I ask her why she would need to do that. Just working would prevent that from being needed? She'd just need to unlock the PC after it breaks, surely. She says no. She just wants to be able to go into the other room and watch TV and just check on it on occasion. Now, without telling a user to just suck it up and just do what they're paid to do, how do you communicate that sentiment? I politely tell her that we really can't change the setting because it's set by corporate policy. I explain it's a security measure that provides a first line of defense against unauthorized access if her laptop gets stolen. I ask if she has other work to do between that time and 8 p.m. to keep her PC unlocked. She claims there's not. I suggest, usually when we're bored on weekends, we find work to occupy ourselves, or ask the boss what needs doing over the weekend since we're being paid to work. Truth is, we watch a lot of YouTube on the weekends. She didn't leave happy with my suggestion. You know, people spend so much time trying to figure out how to get out of doing work that it would be easier just to do the work. We need you to tell us our current password. No, not reset. Tell us. We must have that exact password. For a backstory, I worked for a small tech company. Our largest client was a national franchise, so effectively a group of small businesses. Each site was its own franchise, but some sites were in their own groups. A few years prior, head office had a very basic software and a lot of franchises had their own. When we came on the scene, these systems were integrated into ours by the franchises, mostly using our APIs, often badly. When we first rolled out, we were a fairly immature company and lacked a lot of best practice guidelines, including how passwords are assigned. New passwords were all the same. Think change me, and users should change this, but at the time we didn't have any enforcement of that. One unassuming Tuesday, our tech support team receives a request to retrieve a password. We explain they can reset it automatically, but that's not what they want. They want us to tell them their password. Our tech guy explains why we can't do this and ends the call. We get another call from the same user 20 minutes later, asking the same thing. Unfortunately for them, we're a small team, so it goes to the same tech and he reiterates what he said before, and the call ends. 10 minutes later, we get a call from the user's manager. Turns out they use the account for lots of things and have that password saved, but can't currently access any of these devices. We explain that whilst that sucks, there's F all we can do, and besides, each user should have their own account. The convo got a bit heated, but the call ends and that's that. Or so we think. Around lunchtime, we get a call from one of the senior guys at head office who asks us the exact same thing. We're obviously annoyed that they keep on trying to pull rank and that no one seems to care about security, but we listen and begin to explain when he drops a bombshell on us. They don't actually use our software, but a series of their own, both developed in-house and bought and stitched together. Their only use for us is to transfer data from home office into their own systems and vice versa. The account in question is used by 8 different applications, and its details are hard-coded into their calls. Their only developer is off on a 5-week jaunt in the Aussie outback and is completely unreachable. If we change this password, we would kill these sites completely. Even lending a dev wouldn't help as their gallivanting dev is the only one with access. A lot of back and forth goes on and we get a senior dev onto the call to explain how we can't access these passwords, etc., and more talking in the office about it. Dev gets annoyed at me and shows me the database. That's the password, all encrypted looking. As he scrolls, we notice something. A lot of the entries look identical. We weren't salting them? including the account in question? That's when it dawns on us. They never changed the password from the default. A quick login attempt validates this, and we give our conclusion to the client and to Home Office. Home Office also gets an absolutely deserved earful about security and ensuring their sites follow policies from our CEO, who is not happy half of his company has been dealing with this BS for the best part of a day. In some ways, it's an utter miracle no one got into their systems. That same password had been sent to tens of thousands of users on our first rollout before we changed the process. Randomly generated single-use password. You only needed the email address to get in, and that was literally sitename@companyname.com. How that lasted 2 years, I shall never know. Well, I see two problems here. One was the lack of security on the software to begin with those password issues, and two, the other company or the other franchise having only one guy that can access their stuff. I don't understand that. There should be some sort of backup somewhere. I mean, if this guy decided to get in a huff and leave one day, does that mean everything in your company shuts down? What's a handover? Throwaway, just in case. Was contracted to a private firm as desktop support technician with 7 years experience, because the 3 people that were IT management and help desk left halfway through the Azure migration. I had 2 weeks for the poorly managed and dated environment to be handed over to me, which isn't enough time, but I drew out as much blood from the stone as I could. Spend the next 5 months with the other first-time help desk guy, who absolutely shines in the mess he's been dropped in, taking advantage of the lack of change management to implement security procedures, implement day-to-day operating procedures, implement Zendesk, manage autopilot config, deploy laptops to people that didn't have them, so we could finish the migration. And then implemented a change management process as the new management started bringing in contractors to patch up some higher level stuff. All of this was meticulously documented. During this time, I discovered my love for Azure and implementing change. The new management had a financial background and were making nepotism hires left and right, and completely re-architecting the plans that were laid out for the migration when we were halfway through. The entire time they were grateful for what I was doing and definitely had a role waiting for both of the help desk team at the end of everything. Come the end of everything, I get a call from my contractor guy saying, they're swapping providers, so we'll probably get an extra 2 months after the end of your contract to hand over the new dudes. Next day, they let me know my contract isn't being renewed at all, and that the handover will happen in my last week. I ask if they think that's enough time, and they smile and nod. 4 days remain. The new guy comes in from the new contractors and asks approximately 0 questions. He had a year's experience in support somewhere else, but before that was working in a bar. I show him my documentation, show him the important systems. He has 0 Azure experience. I try my best, I swear to God. Every time I walk in for those 4 days, he's watching guitar videos on YouTube and looking at the Zendesk guide page, which isn't applicable to any day-to-day operations. It's full of user-focused documentation for stuff like how to reset your dock. Last day rolls around. Still no questions. At this point, I've switched off. My tickets are up to date, but I give him every opportunity to ask anything. My counterpart, whose contract finishes a month after mine, recognizes his value as the only person who now understands how the environment is run, and I push him to ask for a pay raise before signing a new contract. They offer a pittance, and he tenders his resignation so he can leave 4 days earlier than if he just runs out the contract, just to rub dirt in the wound of their poor choices. The next week I hear that the remote desktop finance is run from goes down for the entire week. Tickets that are normally split evenly between the 2 on the desk are now weighed 50-5 on the new guy's side, which is bizarre because we maintain a maximum of 20 at all times. The nail in the coffin for me was vendor calling me today to ask what the F was happening there. They asked new guy to check if an AP was plugged in, and he responded, "This has already been logged with vendor." I let him know it's out of my control, but I tried my best. Meanwhile, I found a temporary level 1 role with level 3 pay, while I use my free time to collect a few Azure certs so I can pursue my newfound love of Azure cloud management. Got my buddy in the role and in touch with a recruitment agent who is offering pay that is in line with what he's worth. Still got a few contacts inside to keep me updated beyond that. One thing I've learned in management over the years, off and on, is that you gotta listen to the people below you. They'll help keep you straight, they really will, especially if you take care of them and pay them what they're worth. You have cancer and almost passed out waiting? then you shouldn't be here at all. I recently started working at my local electronics store, and one day, whilst I was doing resets of returned computers, there was an elderly man sitting on one of the waiting chairs, and he asked me if I could queue him in for tech support. It was me and 3 others. We're very short-staffed. I asked him if he had an appointment, and he said no. He just told me about how he had cancer and almost passed out waiting for us. I hadn't been properly trained just yet, so I asked one of my higher-ups to take care of him. I overheard the conversation that ensued, and the man said again that he had cancer and almost passed out waiting, but my higher-up saw through him and said that if he's prone to passing out simply sitting and waiting, then that's an urgent medical issue and he should see a doctor, as a tech store is the last place he wants to be if he does pass out. The guy just left, but man, was it satisfying to witness. Well, if he'd have made an appointment, he probably could have walked in really close to his appointment time and not had the issue of waiting. I love how everybody wants to use medical excuses and everything else to try to jump lines and be first, get special treatment. The joys of bowling desk. So I've worked in bowling alleys for years, but recently got hired in a new place with a shiny new setup for the computer side of things. To my surprise, all the terminals are running Windows 10. Fast forward a few weeks and I come into work on a Saturday night. The first thing I notice is that there's no one bowling on a Saturday night in the spring. For the people that don't know, Saturdays are usually the busiest day of the week for bowling alleys. So I walk up to my manager and say, "Hey P, it's pretty dead, isn't it?" He responds to me explaining that he's had to turn customers away all day because the computers have been acting up. So because I would like to think I'm somewhat tech savvy, I ask what the problem was. He says, "The computer's been on a blue screen all day." I immediately assume our system is dead until I check the main terminal screen. It turns out that my manager decided that the best time to do a massive backlog of Windows updates was in the middle of the day on a Saturday. So in short, that's how we lost hundreds of dollars in revenue because my older manager decided it was update time. Yeah, even if the system wasn't totally backlogged, I still wouldn't choose to do an update around my busiest time. Who knows what could happen? You spend how much on paper? If you worked in a law firm before the 2010s, you can skip this next 3 paragraphs, or don't if your blood needs a little reminiscence boiling. For the rest of you, let me explain paper. If you've not worked there, you might think of law firms as floating in money from the ridiculous fees they charge for the most minor of tasks, like a 2-second phone call, and that they probably waste half of it. You're right. When it comes to printing, law firms are nuts. They still are, but before the early 2010s, they were on an even higher level. I stood still in a spot in a law firm's office in 2002-ish, and I could reach out and touch 4 HP 4000 printers, all with 2 additional trays and the manual feed tray in use, 5 types of stationery, and from that same spot there was the big floor-standing HP 8000 just 6 feet away. That was for the big prints and it just had reams, literally, of plain paper in it. The reason for all this? Nothing and everything. Law firms have to print the first page of the client copy on headed paper, all subsequent pages on continuation paper, which is like headed but usually a smaller logo and address block pushed up to the thin header of the page. File copies are on plain white paper with a file copy watermark printed diagonally over it, or in the header or somewhere else, and the plain paper might be the same plain for normal printing, or the lawyers might have argued they want heavier stock as they're dealing with it every day and they're the ones bringing in the damn money, or maybe it's green paper because reasons. Then you'll have a different watermark for a copy in the situation where the original was lost, on plain paper, or headed and continuation, or blue, why the heck not? Then there's faxes. Yes. Yes, in 2010, yes. But not now, right? Wrong. Still faxes. Compliment slips and a bunch of other ways of printing that I've therapeutically removed from my memory. How can this ever work, I hear you scream? In short, really complicated printing code, often word macros, massive print dialogues, and an array of print like this buttons. If you've ever wondered why IT is making a big deal about the amazing deal you can get on competitor court printers and why they're so attached to their printer brand, ta-da! With all these requirements on printing, there's inevitable waste. People load the wrong tray or print to the wrong tray. There's a lot of thrown away paper, and therefore there's a market for saving printing costs. Enter MyCorp with our amazing software to make printing more accurate, saving time and frustration. I jest, but it really was good. The savings had to be played down to make it believable. As you can imagine, every firm is different, so we'd have to have a couple of hours at the client with questions and calculators to work out how much we thought the product would cost and save. We did so for one company who had the most ridiculous printing requirements I ever saw. They needed 2 copies of a file copy, one for the partners' files and one for the account file. The partners' one was to be printed on plain white paper. The accounts file was to be printed on green paper. To solve this, they had botched together some code to print page 1 twice, page 2 twice, page 3 twice, etc. to a specific tray. That tray, ladies and gentlemen, was filled with interleafed white and green paper, which they bought in reams already interleafed at least double the price of the white and green paper within if they'd been separate. What's even better is that every now and then someone would accidentally print an email to that tray. 3 pages in the bin, and now the top page is green. So when someone prints their document, the green one is on top, so they throw that away. I can never understand that part. They separate them manually afterwards because they hate their staff, I guess. So what does it matter? To get around this problem, after an incorrect print, they'd open the tray and bin another sheet so the top one was white again. So we went over it all and we calculated that our roughly £50,000 software would save them roughly £330,000 every year. And roughly £300,000 of that was the cost and waste cost associated with this green paper. Bristling with pride and thinking about the wonderful case study this could make for our product, we presented it to them and it got rejected. I'm sorry, what? They said no? We could not understand it at all. We had suggested a watermark instead of the green paper, and this was a point they raised. Sure that we could still make enormous savings and bag ourselves a client, we redid the numbers with a tray of regular green paper. It's ridiculous, but if they have to have green paper, it'll still save a ton of money getting reams of just green paper. The savings were down to about roughly £180,000. This is annual savings for a one-off cost with a small annual fee. They still said no. A few months later, after another site visit and most definitely in the pub, my boss was told that one of the partner's sons happens to run a printing company that, wouldn't you know it, supplies the firm's paper. Wow, so there's a mind-blowing combination going on here of nepotism, stupidity on the partner's part, and just overall bad management, bad organizational skills. Hey guys, thanks for hanging out with me today. If you've enjoyed this content, would you do me a favor? Would you consider giving this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and maybe click that little bell icon so you don't miss the fat guy with the beard telling you stories. See ya!